afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Friday, July 10th of 2020. On behalf of Old Dominion University, welcome to REYES Remote Experience for Young Engineers and Scientists. My name is Nestor Escobales, and I am a senior lecturer here in the Engineering Technology Department at Old Dominion University. Today, I will be serving as a moderator for the Engineering Fundamentals session, part 2, titled Steam Power. I am positive you will find this talk very interesting. The presenter for this session is Professor Nathan Lotke, who is a master lecturer in the Department of Engineering Technology at Old Dominion University. Professor Lotke has been with ODU for 15 years and completed undergraduate and graduate programs in mechanical engineering at Old Dominion University. Professor Lotke is currently in the MET program director, and it is also very involved in the fluids and thermal labs as well. Professor Lotke has concentrated his research on the fuel mixing and combustion characteristics of dual-mode scramjet engines, radiation mitigation, and it is very interested in incorporating renewable energy systems into the lab environment. We will start in a few seconds with the presentation, and around 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we will switch to questions from the audience. However, feel completely free to start sending your questions as you listen to the talk. Professor Lotke will answer to as many questions as possible during the last part of our segment. Without further ado, here is Professor Nathan Lotke.
This is my video. Yep. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. So let me go ahead and pull up my presentation, and then I'll tell you what we're going to be doing today. So let me get this thing shared real quick. Get it full screen and presentation. All right, so let's see. What I'm going to do today is, so last time we started off talking about the MET department or the MET program and what that's all about if you get an MET degree and what OD is about for that. And then we did the conduction discussion and went over the experiment. Today we're going to go over the steam power plant first because it's probably the same length of a discussion as the conduction. And then I'll go through everything on Blackboard, and then we'll jump into all the questions. And then when that's done, I'm going to go back and redo the MET introduction and discuss the program for those of you that weren't here last week, because I know that we're probably getting a lot of students who can't make it every time. So that's the current plan. So what is this all about? One of the biggest things that you're going to study, before we get going, I want to apologize. I did not sleep well last night, so I may start zoning out at some point, and I may miss a question or two. I'm not going to zone out, but I may not be as exciting as last time, if you considered me exciting last time. But I'm going to do my best. So in thermodynamics, from a mechanical or mechanical technology perspective, you always take 2 semesters of thermodynamics. So the first semester is kind of background, the tools, what is energy, what is work, what is heat transfer, how do you determine the properties of substances, things like that. And then thermo part 2 is almost always power cycles and refrigeration and air conditioning systems. So what we really spend a lot of time in that class is trying to figure out how can we generate useful power, because there's energy everywhere around us. I mean, you go outside on a cold day, there's tons of energy. It's just that it's not dense energy because it's cold air, and it's not, ready to be used. You have to find some device that can use it. So one of the most common types of devices that we have for harnessing power is called a heat engine. We're not going to get into heat engines in this class and in all the details. We're just going to kind of focus specifically on steam power. But before we do, it's good to kind of get an overview of our energy consumption, what we use it for, how efficient things are, all that good stuff before we get actually into the actual steam power plant. Because we're not going to be able to get into the actual cycle details. If some of you are, I know some of you are in college, and if you've taken thermodynamics, you probably started using steam tables. We're not doing any of that. I'm going to have that all kind of done in the background in the activity. But we can still talk a good deal about what these are all about and how they work. So let's see. Let me get my mouse up here. So this is some interesting information I found recently that I just hadn't actually looked for. And then when I found it, I was kind of blown away. So this is the sources. Now this is US. So for international people, it's going to be different. But I'm sure you can find the same information. It's just I've got the US information because that's where I'm at. So this is sources of energy consumed in US 2019. Now it is leaving out, there's a few other like external sources of energy that is going to be on the next slide. No real details on them, but it's probably like batteries and other things like that, or imported, something like that. It's not anything on the left, but we'll get there in a minute. So these are the main sources of energy. You got solar is about 1% of the 100.2 quads of energy consumed in 2019 in the US. What's a quad? It is 1 times 10 to the 18 joules. So it's a lot of energy. 1% of that was solar. About 8.5% is nuclear. And all of that, I'm sure, well, all of that was going to be steam power plants, because steam power plants can be powered by nuclear. Or, nuclear powered submarines and ships and stuff, or aircraft carriers. We got hydro, that's hydroelectric. So think of dams. Is about 2.5%. Wind is about 2.74%. Geothermal is about 0.21%, not very much. That's when you get the thermal energy from underground. Natural gas is about 32%, and that's rising because we found better ways to get it out. I mean, if you're familiar with fracking, that's pulling a lot of natural gas out of the ground. There's a lot of people that there's pros and cons with that, but we are getting a lot more of that out. Coal, which is kind of diminishing, is 11.38%. We're just not using as much coal as we used to because we have other options to do cleaner things. Biomass, you think of biodiesels and things like that, algae that are turned into fuel. And then petroleum, good old petroleum, 36.63%. So those are all the sources that we currently use. And I really don't think there's any other source. I think that is all the sources, because even if you have a battery or something like that, it's getting charged from one of those sources right there. One day we might figure out how to harness, solar wind, but we're not there yet. So that solar up there is photovoltaic, is all that is. So that's the sources of energy consumed in 2019. Now, what did we do with all that? We obviously had to use it for something. So I'm gonna let you look at this for a minute. I hope it comes out good on your screens. So this was a full diagram. So you can see, let's start on the top. You can see electricity generation accounts for 37% of the energy used in the US. That's a lot. And if you look over here, you can see 12% went to residential, 9.39 went to commercial, 26 to industrial, and 28 to transportation in terms of all the energy consumed. And then you can see on the right-hand side, so I'm not really getting into details on all the other lines there. I had actually developed this for a course I'm going to teach next fall called Energy Systems, where we look at this stuff. How do we use energy and how do we harness it and how do we improve it? But it's good for what we're doing here because we're going to focus on electricity generation, which I don't have a pen here, but electricity generation is what we're going to focus on. But what's really important, I think, hopefully you've noticed now, if you haven't, you will, look at all that waste energy. We have still not gotten better than throwing away almost 68% or 67.5% of the energy that we pull from the earth or pull from the atmosphere or pull from hydroelectric or nuclear. We only use 32.5% of that. Everything else gets lost, gets wasted. That's a shame. When you study thermodynamics, you'll study something called the second law of thermodynamics. And it talks about, from a thermodynamic standpoint, why we can't use all the energy that we're supplying to produce work on the other end. There's limitations to that, but they're not that bad. If we can make everything run like a Carnot cycle, like someone mentioned last time, Carnot cycle, then we would have much better, we probably flip those numbers right there. But we can't do that either because it's cost prohibitive to design things that do that or that efficient, etc. So what we try and do, though, is we try and improve efficiency by even 1%. You can save a lot of money. Small increases save a lot. And down the road, we probably will actually improve this waste energy a lot because you look down here and see transportation. How much of transportation is waste energy? And how much of it is petroleum? See, and if you look up here and say maybe the electricity generation, we would have, you see, it's hard to see, I don't have a pointer, but it's probably about maybe about 30% is consumed and 60% is wasted for electricity generation. For petroleum, it looks like about maybe 20% or less is used and all the rest is wasted. So when cars go electric, people talk about we need to do one-to-one electric cars to make any difference. I think sometimes there's people who just don't want to have electric cars, but we don't, because you can see it's the ratio. It's basically, it's a 2-to-1 waste energy on the electric side versus a 4 to 1 on the transportation side. So once we just get, if we just change the fleet of cars to maybe half of them electric, we're going to improve this big time. And we're getting there. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 10, 15 years, the chart here really has some drastic changes, and we're up to maybe energy services, maybe 40% waste energy down to 60, just because of electric cars and the fact that they're running off of electricity generation. So we'll see. But that's what we use it for. As I mentioned, 67.4% of that was all wasted. So for every dollar that you spend on power or on the energy source, you're throwing away 67.4% of it, or 67.4 cents. That's a lot of wasted money. We're always trying to improve it. Small improvements can make a big cost savings. It's been a few years now, but I was listening to an episode on NPR. So those of you that are international, that's just our public radio. They were talking about and this was probably 10 years ago. I heard it now because I was a college student at the time. No, I was not a college. I was a grad student. No, I was graduated because I graduated 20 years ago. But it's been a while now. But I was listening to it, and so they had increased the overall cycle efficiency by about 0.5%, and they saved about $1 million a year in coal costs. So small percentages go a long way when you look at the quantity of fuel being consumed by these power plants when we're talking about electricity generation. So you don't have to make a huge change, just need to make small changes. So it is our job as engineers. One of the big things that we do, and you don't really do a lot of that as an undergrad, you study cycles, you study systems, power production, power plants, and you get a feel for why they're not that efficient. And you might have a lab class or write a paper or do a project where you try and propose ways to make it better, but you don't really do that when you get out in industry. And that's really what we do. Aside from making sure things don't break and they're designed properly, we're also trying to find ways to reduce wasted energy and design our power production systems to be much more efficient. So we do this 2 ways. First thing, you got to pick the right tool for the job. Like I said last time, you wouldn't cut a football field with a weed whacker. You could, but it'd be very inefficient. You'd use a bush hog or a tractor. So the engineer's job is to pick the right tool for the job. Do you want a propeller plane, or do you want a turbojet engine, depending on what you're doing with the plane? Do you want a huge, city-capable steam power plant, or a electric generator for the backyard if the power goes out? It all depends on what the job is. You got to pick the right tool, or you're wasting energy most likely. And then we're going to improve the tools that we've selected. That could be as simple as better materials, so there's less friction in the bearings if there's rotary devices. It might be insulating things better, better fuel-air mixtures and combustion, a lot of things. It could, lightening the load so you're not wasting so much energy just trying to move something if it's a vehicle. There's a lot going on there, but that's what we got to try and figure out. So always ask yourself, what job are we trying to perform? I've just got kind of a list of things here that we think about in thermodynamics a lot. Are you designing, trying to power a passenger automobile or a big rig semi-tractor, right? You want a small, efficient gasoline engine or electric motor, or do you want a big honking diesel or the new Tesla electric motors, right? You got to decide what you're trying to do. Diesel, gasoline, you want, how many cylinders, how many liters, what kind of displacement do you want? That's all going to contribute to the fuel consumption and power production. Are you trying to power a freight train? Well, now that's a whole other thing right there, right? A lot of the tools we use are very similar. I mean, you can power a car, a big rig semi-tractor, a freight train, and a ship, all on a diesel engine, but they're different scale diesel engines, and they're way different scales, and they have different components to make them work better. But it's a lot, it's a lot of the similar tools that we have to convert energy around us into something useful. That's really what we try and do. Are you trying to power a small fishing boat or a high-speed motorboat, right? A little John boat with a little trolling motor or some serious 800 horsepower outboards. You want to generate thrust for a full-size or a model airplane? Or are you trying to lay fertilizer over a field where you need just a little prop plane? Or are you trying to go fight a war with a fighter jet, right? So again, what tool do you need? There's different tools that do different things. Or they do them better in certain applications. Are you going to cut the grass in a small yard or a large field? Do you need to generate enough electrical power for one home during outages, or enough electrical power for an entire city? Now, if this was a class and we were on the class, we might talk about, well, let's just pick one of these and delve deeper into it. But because I'm presenting to you and it's not quite like that, I'm going to answer that question for you. We're going to generate enough electrical power for an entire city. So I made that easy. So that's what we're going to do. So let's look now what we're going to do with that. So now we need to decide what reasonably available option is best. I mean, people propose all kinds of crazy ideas for how we're going to produce power. They may not be so crazy in 50 years, but right now, if we don't have the technology or the materials or the theory for it, we can't do it. So you got to look at what's reasonably available, right? If your design that you're going to tell your boss is going to be 20 years of development and millions of dollars and not much return, that's not reasonable, right? So right now, the most reasonable options, let's look, the major sources of electrical power generation in the US in 2018. So this is for electrical power generation, like for cities and buildings and just keeping the lights on, right? 61% of that was steam turbines, steam power plants. That's a whole lot, right? That's a huge amount. So they are the bulk of it. Now it's changing and we'll probably have more gas turbines in the future, but right now it's about 24% gas, sometimes called combustion turbines. Those engines are very similar to what you see on a turbojet engine, a fighter jet. It's just, what do you do with the exhaust gases? Do you run them through a turbine to produce power, or do you run them through a nozzle to produce thrust? But the basic design is similar. And if you take MET or MET 350, if you take it at ODU, it will be called MET 350 or MAE 312. But if you are in other school, it's probably going to be your Thermo 2 class. 7% is hydroelectric. Everyone, well, not everyone, but we seem to think hydroelectric dams are completely environmentally neutral, but they're really not, because you have to flood an entire area in order to make a dam, right? So they're nice if it's in the right location, but they're very specific to the application. 7% wind turbines. People complain about how they look, but hopefully we are going to have a lot more of these in the future, because they do seem like, there's so much wind out there, right? We're just not there yet. It's a matter of designing cheaper, inexpensive turbines, more efficient turbines, so you don't need as many of them, maybe. And then right now, it's only 1% solar photovoltaic systems. It's getting better. We're going to have more of those, but we don't have those yet. I mean, it's just a matter of cost of production, right? What's reasonable? So looking at all these things right here, we need to figure out what is the best option, or maybe pick two options and then try and go from there. Now I'm looking at powering an entire city, or in our lab, the thing can run about 5 light bulbs, so not that much. But let's look at it from big city perspective. The two big choices are steam turbines and gas turbines. Hydroelectric, wind, and solar basically are just extra buffer into the system. It all gets fed into the grid, and then it gets to your houses. So you can say that you're all wind power, but you're really not. You're getting the power that all got dumped on the grid. The wind power got dumped on the grid. Now you might, I don't know how they deal with that with the, if you're, I don't think there's any way to separate that stuff out, is what I'm thinking here. So I'm not an electrical engineer, but in the end, all gets dumped on the grid, and we're going to look at those top two: steam turbines and gas turbines. Oh, and the last one there was less than 1% internal combustion engines. By that, we mean like large diesels or gasoline engines that would be used to generate electric power. They can, but for like home, that'd be more like generators. And, remote buildings that are out there in the field, construction sites that need to power the offices, that would be big generators. So Generac, things like that. But that's not very much, because they don't power large quantities, just small things. And this is all from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, reported November 5th, 2019, but this is 2018 data that they reported in that report. So that's pretty up to date. Now, again, this is just U.S. Some countries are going to be different for sure. So now we got to figure out which one is available we want to do. We're going to look at the top two. We're going to see which one is more, or we're really going to look at pros and cons of them, so you have an idea of the pros and cons, but we're really going to delve deeper into the steam turbines. So we're going to narrow it down based on our needs. I want to power a big city. Need a lot of power. So let's weigh our options. I'm just going to talk about this only because, when students are in the lab, let's see. So here's a question right here from Clara Bloom in Connecticut, USA. What type of engineering degree would lead one to work with these questions of energy? That would be mechanical or mechanical technology. If you're looking at the fuels, you could do chemical engineering, but the actual power plants is almost solely mechanical technology. Now, dams will be a lot of civil, but the turbines that produce the power that are in the dams are mechanical. So steam turbine pros, they can use a variety of cheap fuels. I mean, you can use coal, anything that'll burn in a furnace can boil water, right? So that's one pro, and there's a lot more pros and cons. I just kind of grabbed a few from some books and things that I've told my students over the years. This is definitely not extensive, just a few of each. They're suitable for large power demands. You can produce large quantities of power with steam turbines, and it's just a steady, steady flow. So if you have a big city and you know that you have a minimum base level of power that you need, steam power plant is good for that because it can definitely do that. And they're very reliable. There's not much to them. It's boiling water, turning into vapor, open a valve, it's going to go down the pipe. So as long as you design it right and maintain the turbines and things like that, they're pretty well reliable. But there are some cons, like anything. Very high initial cost. Steam power plants are big. I mean, you have to be near water, usually for the condenser. You've got large cooling towers. You got large industrial furnace. You got large turbines. You got fuel storage. I mean, there's a lot of land you got to buy, a lot of infrastructure. It's a very complex thing, not cheap to build one. They also can't respond quickly to power demand changes. What that means is, so steam, like if you're in your car and you hit the throttle, you can climb a hill really quick, right? If you drop a gear and go up the hill, you can accelerate. You can really change the power delivery to the road as you need it. Steam power plants don't do that. They take a long time to get up and running. You got to heat the water, boil it. You got to get the turbine up to speed. You got to get everything running. And in the lab we do in the class, the activity you're going to do is going to go through reading the results. But in the class, we actually have the students go through and crank all the valves and get this thing running. And it takes about an hour to preheat it. I mean, that's just a small scale one. So they can't respond quickly to that. They're not good for peak loads if you know that you're going into, a hot weekend, and your city only has a steam power plant, you might be out of luck if you run out of, unless you ramp it up right away, but then you might be wasting energy because you can't ramp it back down again very quickly. They also have very high water demands because they need condensers. What's a condenser for? We'll talk about that. We're not getting into the thermodynamics of why condensers there, why the second law means that thermodynamics tells you have to have one. We're not getting into the energy specific details of the water and vapor, but we're going to talk a bit about that. So that's some pros and cons of steam turbines. Gas turbines, they can reach full capacity very quickly. They can spool up really quick. The one we have in the lab, up in 5 minutes. Now, there are a lot of power plants called combined power plants where you've actually got a gas turbine and a steam power plant working in tandem. So the city or whatever, whoever needs the energy can have a nice base level of energy with the steam turbine, and then they can ramp it up if they need to for the gas turbine. And how that works is the exhaust gases from the gas turbine are used to help boil the water in the steam power plant. We're not going to get into that today either. We're going to look at a very simple steam power plant idea. But that helps with efficiency, which we're always trying to do. So it can respond quickly to peak power demand, which is basically the same thing as the first one. Can reach full capacity quickly, it fires up, and it can change output very quickly. It doesn't need, it's like a car almost. It's not the same kind of engine, but it can spool up and spool down really quickly because all you're doing is throwing fuel and air into a combustion chamber. It explodes and it rushes through the turbine. Steam power plant, you have to change the amount of flow rate of water you're trying to boil, and that takes time. Combustion is very quick. Less, if any, water demands. There's no condensers. You might have water for cooling things, but you're not condensing anything. You're just dumping the exhaust gases out in the atmosphere. And some people say, well, sometimes it is a bit cleaner too, because a lot of gas turbines are using natural gas, which does burn a lot cleaner than coal and diesel and other petroleum products. So I didn't put that in there, but they tend to be cleaner than steam power plants. Now, if you have a nuclear power plant or natural gas power plant, it's a moot point, but it's another one of those pros right there. Cons, though, its overall efficiency is lower than a steam power plant, which is why if you had a city and you knew that you're trying to power it, you'd probably just use a steam power plant if you had to pick one or the other. It's more efficient, it can handle the big load, but if you know you're going to be having peak, ups and downs, you might want to throw a gas turbine in there or have a combined cycle, steam and gas together, which a lot of them are combined nowadays. And in Thermo 2, usually, depending on where you go to school at, you talk a lot about steam power plants, and then at the very end, you get into gas turbines or combined cycles after you've studied gas turbines and steam power plants. Cons, net output is also, that's the net work output is lower than steam power plants. The main reason for that is In a steam power plant, the work required to pump the feed water is what we call the liquid water coming out of the condenser going into the boiler. We're feeding the boiler with the water. We have to get up to the boiler pressure, which is much higher than the condenser. It doesn't take a lot of work to compress a liquid, so you don't need that much pump work in. The gas turbines, you're compressing incoming air, so it takes more work on the compressor to compress it. So it does eat away at your net power because you have to run those compressors, and you typically run them off of the turbine, so you're sucking some of the power out. So it's not as much power either as a steam power plant, given the same amount of fuel consumption. Also, very high combustion chamber temperatures leads to reduced wear, unless, and as we get better materials, you might think, well, we're not going to have, as much wear, and that's true. We might not have as much wear, but we're not there yet. So there's that to deal with as well. In a steam turbine, the industrial furnace supplies the heat to the pot, which is the boiler, and the water's in there and it boils. So it's, the temperature in steam turbines is maxed around 620 Celsius because the steam turbines can't handle that much. But combustion chambers hit really high temperatures because that's where all the fuel and air mixture is happening and explosions. So there's some pros and cons. We're going to have to weigh our options, finalize our decision. Well, I'm doing it for you. We're doing the steam power plant because that's what we have in the lab. We do have a gas turbine there as well, but I don't have that developed yet for the online activities. So we have the steam power plant. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pick a steam power plant we're going to look at. So now that we've picked it, we need to improve the tool that we've selected. But to do that, we have to first understand how the tool works. You can't improve a gasoline engine if you don't know how a gasoline engine works. You can't improve a jet engine if you don't know how a jet engine works. You can't improve a steam power plant if you don't know how a steam power plant works, right? You got to know the basic components, understand how they interact, and where the sources of the largest inefficiencies are, so you can maybe focus your goals. One thing you do in Thermo 1 and Thermo 2 as an undergraduate is you really simplify these cycles down. You're really looking more at ideal models for these cycles, ignoring a lot of energy losses, just so you get an understanding of how they work, and then you can kind of figure out trends. Like if you increase the boiler pressure, how will that affect power output and efficiency? It's not going to be the exact same number you would have in real life because we're simplifying things down. But again, that's where, how do you understand it? You start simple. Undergraduate level, Thermo 1, Thermo 2, what's the very basics, principles of how it works, and then you can take a more advanced course. So when we teach MET 450, that course is the more advanced steam power plant gas turbines. It gets more into all those details, but we're not doing that here. And most students don't bother getting into that because they don't really care to, but I love this stuff. So now once you know how it works, then we need to determine its performance, because you can't improve something if you don't know what the baseline is, right? So you have to define some performance characteristics. What are the most important ones to look at? Where's the biggest energy losses coming? If you can figure out all the performance characteristics from the beginning where the fuel supply to the end where the power is delivered, you can start to figure out where the most losses are and where it might be worth investing our time and money to improve. And then once we know its performance, we can propose ways to improve it. And hopefully that's where you get your big paycheck. And you get the bonus at work if you say the right thing and save a lot of money. Like that one guy, I'm sure it was a whole team of guys and girls, or men and women, who increased the overall plant efficiency by about 0.5% and saved millions of dollars. I don't think they saw much of that, but hopefully they got a bonus. So, steam power plant basics. Steam power plants are extremely complex, not so much because of what's going on in terms of boiling water, expanding it to a turbine and condensing it and pumping it back in the boiler. It's because there's a lot of auxiliary equipment in there to try and improve the efficiency. There's a lot of mixing chambers, a lot of secondary boilers, secondary reheaters, a lot of multiple turbines, feed water heaters, steam traps, throttling valves, cogeneration, a lot of things going on in a modern steam power plant. Again, all that is to help improve efficiency. Find something else some way to reduce the amount of energy added to the boiler and get the same amount of power output, or something out of it, something useful. But we're going to look at the very basic one. 4 basic components of steam power plant. First one is meat and butter. I mean, it's the most important part is the boiler, right? It boils and then superheats to a high pressure, boil and then superheat high pressure water using a heat source. So basically we're going to be feeding the boiler with just liquid water. We're going to boil it till it's all vapor. Now, one thing you learn in Thermo 1 when you look at properties of pure substances is we then superheat it to a temperature above its boiling temperature. So we get really, really, really hot vapor. All right. So why that is, we're not going to get into. And I appreciate Deja Alexander for the request. I will do my best to slow down here. I don't know why I'm so tired today, and yet I'm going fast. So boiler, they usually run at very high pressures, 8, 10, 15 megapascals. Let's see. Luis Engel Vergara Ortiz from Hidalgo, Mexico. Is there any way to produce energy from chemical reactions? If so, what would we use it for? So when Luis, when I hear chemical reactions, I'm thinking combustion, because you're mixing fuel and air and having a reaction. And that would be natural gas, because you're releasing the heat. If you meant a different other type of chemical reaction, send me, send that in another question, and I'll see if I can address that. But for me, I mean, most of the time, these types of devices, they are taking chemical energy stored in the fuel, releasing that energy as heat through an exothermic reaction, which is combustion, and then that heat is then supplied to the actual, whatever the medium is in the cycle. Is it air? Is it water? Whatever, in order to complete a cycle. So in a steam power plant, it's a boiler. And this is just kind of the schematic over here on the left. Common heat sources are coal, natural gas, and nuclear. There's others out there, probably, I'm sure there's some power plants that use diesel or gasoline. But these are the three most common sources of heat. We have to burn it. Burn the coal, burn the natural gas. For nuclear, it's just a nuclear reactor which releases the heat. And that boils the water. Turns it into superheated water vapor. Now, we mentioned that, you boil it and then you superheat it. We aren't going to go into detail on why you superheat it. But I will say that you get more power and more efficiency if you superheat it than if you just boiled it and then tried to expand it through a turbine. There's a lot of reasons for that. All right, so that's the first major component. You might automatically be thinking like, I bet if I touch that boiler, it'd be hot. And if you do, that means you're losing energy to the surroundings. So not all the chemical energy released by the fuel, they are turned to heat, and boiled water is being used to run the turbine, because some of that heat is being lost to the room because that boiler may not be perfectly insulated. So that's what we're trying to think about as engineers. How do we take this energy, harness it, and push it where it's got to go? It's always trying to go everywhere, right? Like I said last time, it's like a pack of wild dogs, but more like a pack of wild cats that just won't listen to you. Next thing we do is we then route the superheated steam, which is high pressure water vapor, through a steam turbine, and it expands to a lower pressure and drives an output shaft connected to a generator. So a steam turbine, you see these fellows down here, it's just it's opened up, that's the casing. It's basically an axial flow. It goes down the length of that, spinning those blades. And then that spins the output shaft, which hooks up to the generator and generates electrical power. So that's where you're going to get the electrical engineers in. Once you get the turbine done and you at the generator side, now it's all electrical engineers. So that's I think there's lots of things that can go wrong there. I mean, go wrong is the wrong word. Lots of things there that can lead to poor performance. You have bad bearings, you have heat loss, all kinds of things. But again, you learn that in thermodynamics. The third major component is the condenser. And the condenser is just a big heat exchanger. We talked about that last time, that there's a ton of heat exchangers out there. That's all it is. And that's a shell and tube heat exchanger. If you can look at that picture closely, and I've got this on PDF on Blackboard so you can look at it closer. Those tubes have the cooling water going through it, and then you have the steam rushing past them, and then the steam is at a much higher temperature than the cooling water, so it cools down and it ends up condensing, and it comes out the other side as a liquid again, no longer vapor. And then that gets fed back up into the boiler, and it repeats the cycle. So that's a condenser. Then we've got the pump, which pumps it back up to the boiler pressure. And that's just an example of a huge pump. Pumps in, boy, and these plants are very big. I gotta stop that. All right. So yeah, so that's the basic four components. Now, when you get into Thermo 2, you'll study, you can have multiple turbines, multiple reheating stages, multiple pumps, multiple condensers, lots of mixing chambers, all kinds of stuff. We're not not worried about that right now. All right, so let's see back here. From Luis Engel, I mean, like apart from combustion, like the common ways, such as carbon, natural gas, etc., are there other materials we could use, like maybe reactions between NaOH and HCl for generating heat? That's a good question. It all depends on how much heat they release and in what density. I'm not a chemical engineer or a chemist, and I never really studied the amount of energy released by things like that. But I'm sure there's some energy, there's some amount of energy released that way. It just depends on if you can get enough, because what you find out in a steam power plant is if you want to produce a lot of power, you have to supply a whole lot of heat. The efficiency might be 30, 40%. So you got to, supply almost double the amount of heat energy relative to the amount of work you're producing. So if you need, 100 megawatts, you're going to need 200 megawatts of thermal energy supply. So you may not be able to do that efficiently with with what you're talking about right there. Another question, Jamie Vasquez Madera. At the end of the class, can you briefly explain the table of properties, saturated liquid, gas, that thermodynamics relies on? The new coming students can have an idea of what to work with and feel much more motivated. Yeah, I'm fine. I can do that. Let me make a note to myself right now, or I might forget. Well, I'll do that after we go through the activity, and then that will also give you guys, if you want to do that, you can. So review. It'll be a very brief review of the tables. I have the tables in PDF format I can show you, and we can talk about it, but I don't have pen and paper to draw the saturation curve and all that kind of stuff. But we can talk a bit about it. So that's the pump. Some people call that the first part. I call it the fourth part because the most important part is the boiler. So that's an overall layout. All those little screenshots were just parts of that. So there's a lot that goes into putting a steam power plant on the ground. Usually you need a river. I mean, I don't think you can do it without a river or a big body of water, because you have to cool off that steam coming out of the turbine in the condenser. And you do that by a heat exchanger supplied with river water. Now, there's a problem with that too, though. The river water coming out of the condenser might be warmer than you want it to be. If it's too warm, it can affect the local flora and fauna. You can have algae blooms. You can have certain fish might not like it. So there's environmental concerns there as well. A lot of times there's a certain temperature difference or temperature rise limit on the cooling water coming back into the river, so that, set forth by the, EPA or whoever's in charge of that stuff. But again, it's also kind of cool. Now, most of you are international, so you don't know this place. Those of you that are local, over there by the high-rise bridge off 64, there's the old power plant over there. The body of water right there where the cooling tower was, we used to call it the hot ditch. And you could go there and you could fish, in the wintertime, and the water would be warm. And you catch fish all the time. It was, but probably wasn't super clean, but we didn't think about that. But it warmed it up enough. So that's going to happen in power plants. Lake Anna nuclear reactor, the water there gets pretty warm too, because it's all coming out of the condenser. It's not, nuclear water. It's just cold water, absorb heat from the steam, condense the steam, and then that warmer water gets dumped back out in the lake. So you need a lot of that. That's a basic steam power plant layout. So now that we know kind of how it works, again, we're not going to get into all the details of all the energy losses, but we're going to talk a bit about it. Where does the energy loss come from? Well, combustion chamber, furnace, or nuclear reactor. Usually that's just because it's incomplete combustion. The heat exchanger that is getting that energy into the water, and the boiler may not be perfectly designed right. So it can be several different things. All the heat exchangers and the boiler to heat the water and produce superheated steam to drive the turbines. If your boiler or other heat exchangers are not insulated, you can lose heat to the surroundings. If you've got a lot of pipes in there, that leads to pressure drops, which leads to friction, or leads to friction, which leads to pressure drops, which means you need to have bigger pumps. These are all things that can lead to poor performance. Things you study in thermodynamics. The steam turbine. There's bearings in there. You have to design the blades properly. Depending on the material, they might start, corroding earlier. You got to do a lot with that. So steam turbines, they're used to extract the energy from the steam and transmit it to the electric generator. So we got to get the heat out of the chemical energy or out of the nuclear reaction. Then we got to get that heat into the water to boil it. Then we got to get the energy in that steam to the generator. So these are the major components there, or sources of energy loss that we want to try and improve upon. Electrical generators to convert the shaft power from the turbine, it says form, it should be from, to electricity. So these turbines are producing what we call shaft work. It's rotating a shaft. As the steam rushes past the turbine blades, the shaft rotates high RPM. That's hooked up to a generator and generates electric power. How efficient is that? It's usually one of the most efficient links, or probably not even one of it. It probably is the most efficient link in the chain, next to combustion efficiency. Combustion efficiency is pretty high usually, and so is electrical efficiency. Heat exchangers and condenser to condense the steam after it leaves the turbine. Again, a lot of pipes leads to pressure drops, or leads to friction, which leads to pressure drops, which leads to bigger pumps being required, which means less usable work. If they're not insulated, I mean, it's just all the things. The energy is being lost, being misused. Let's see. Brian, go. So, hi, sir. Later after the presentation, could you explain the concept of exergy to us? That one, if you send me an email, I will send you something on that. I don't want to get into that in this class. I think that's, I mean, there's a lot of students in here who are not, you know, I think that is going to be way over a lot of people's heads. But if you send me an email, I'm happy to even have a Zoom meeting with you sometime, and we can actually talk about that face to face. It's a good question, but exergy, you have to understand entropy, and we're not getting into all that today. But please send me an email. I'd be happy to discuss it with you in person or over Zoom. Let's see. Pumps to bring the water up to the boiler pressure. Now, there's not that many losses there because you don't need a lot of pump work to pump them up, but because it's liquid. But there are losses there. You know, poorly insulated, poor bearings, inefficient design, things like that. And then piping between components. When you are in the class and you draw your property diagrams and you got a condenser, a pump, a boiler, and a turbine, they look like they're just connected right next to each other. You leave the pump, bam, you're in the boiler. That's not really how it is. You've got piping to route it between the places. Ideally, it's very short pipe and very large diameter, so you don't have many losses. And if you take fluid mechanics and study Darcy's equation, D-A-R-C-Y equation, you'll see how the length and the diameter of the pipe affects the friction, which affects the pressure drop. So you're going to have pressure drop in the system. And that, again, leads to larger pumps required to get the boiler back up to where you need it to be. There's also heat loss in those pipes as well. And then Jesus Alberto Perez Vargas from Mexicali, Baja. What is the impact of electric power generation with respect to the carbon footprint? It's better than gasoline engines because it's in, let me see. Let me go back here again real quick. We got time here. Back up a ways here. There we go. All right, so this might kind of show that. So electricity generation, if you look at how much is wasted and how much is used. So we've got, you know, a decent amount of energy lost there. You can see the gray is just wasted energy. But if you look down at the bottom of petroleum, that's mostly for transportation. And look at how much energy loss is in that transportation. You can think that waste energy is directly impacting carbon footprint. That is pollutants, that is heat to the surroundings, that is, you know, all the CO2. Because right now, petroleum produces a lot of CO2 and carbon monoxide when it burns. Electricity generation, we can use natural gas, which burns cleaner. We can use wind, we can use solar, we can use nuclear. All these things are a lot better for that. So it is better. And also when cars go electric generation, they're basically going to be using generated electricity, which means we have more control over the source, more control over the efficiency. We're not running around with, you know, millions of little cars out there, little engines that aren't being maintained. We've got several giant plants that are being maintained like crazy. So it is better that way. So yeah, I think if you're comparing it to transportation, you know, non-electric vehicles, it's way better for the carbon footprint. All right, so back to this. So now that we know where the losses are at, we need to try and find a way to define how do we express these losses so everyone's on the same page. And we do that through performance. When I'm in the lab, sometimes I have a song and dance for this. It's not very good, and I usually stop halfway through it. I'm not going to do it today. But its performance is defined as desired output over required input. Doesn't matter what you're working with. Performance of anything is what is your desired output divided by what is the required input. There's different names for performances depending on what you're talking about. Sometimes we call it an efficiency. Sometimes we call it performance. Sometimes we call it coefficient of performance. It just depends on the application. In steam power plants, we call it efficiency. But in vapor compression or refrigeration cycles, we call it coefficient of performance. Why that is, we don't need to worry about that today. That's thermo stuff, thermodynamic class. But if you know what the output is that you're trying to get, you know what input you need to do to get it, you can define the performance. And that is what we're going to do. So for the activity, leading into this stuff, for the online activity, we've got the power plant that we do in class, and we'll get to that in more detail in a bit. And we've got all the readouts for the pressures and the temperatures at the different locations, you know, before the boiler, after the boiler, et cetera. Got a spreadsheet for you to input the data. And then with that data, you can either go to the steam tables and find your own enthalpies at the different locations, which I'm not supplying you with all that background on this today, because it's just more than you need if you haven't done thermo yet. I've got that all actually being done in a hidden tab. But what's going to do is it's then going to give you the efficiency of the cycle, and you'll see how efficient it is. What you're going to find out is that the overall efficiency of the steam power plant in that lab is 0.33%. I didn't make that up. It's 0.33%. You're going to see it in the numbers. What that means is about 96.7% of the chemical energy in that propane is wasted. Never gets to the generator and the electrical output on the other end. All that energy is gone. In real life, it might be closer to 10, 12, 13%, but there's so much energy loss. Now, but that's why we also, though, have cogeneration power plants. Cogeneration says, all right, I can't convert all that thermal energy into mechanical work. Second law of thermodynamics has two statements. The Clausius statement that says energy goes from hot to cold, and the Kelvin-Planck statement, which says that if you're going to try and produce power using a cycle by supplying heat energy, you can't convert it all to work. You got to throw some of it out. Now, you can use it for other things. You can use some of that thermal energy for textile, plants, for food processing, chemical processing, heating buildings. So this is the overall efficiency of this plant. If you start having cogeneration plants, combined power cycles, the overall goes way up. But ours is 0.33%. It's terrible. It's as simple as that. I probably should have had that just show up right when I hit the other button, but there you go. Simple as that. Now we can define that for our power plant. So in our power plant, I'm going to go through the order from beginning to end in terms of, the energy through the system. First one is combustion efficiency. What that basically is it's the usable heat released during combustion relative to the amount of energy available in the fuel. That's something you would study in chemistry. You're going to do basic stoichiometric chemical balancing. That assumes that you have 100% combustion or chemical reaction. When we say combustion, we're talking about chemical reactions that release heat. We're not talking about endothermic, we're talking exothermic. Let's see. If you are a mechanical engineer taking a course, you'll probably cover that a bit in Thermo 2 sometimes. You'll definitely cover it in a senior electives involving energy systems, internal combustion engines, things like that. You can definitely study it in grad school. But it's it's just chemical reactions with the sole purpose of producing heat release for power cycles, as it from mechanical engineer's perspective. That little symbol right there, it looks like a cursive N that's got a long tail. It's not a cursive N. That is called ETA. It's ETA. It's a Greek symbol, ETA, and it's spelled ETA. That's the universal. Now, some people use different symbols, but that's at least in the US, that's a standard universal symbol for efficiency. And then usually we write as a subscript what type of efficiency that is. So combustion efficiency is heat released by combustion over chemical energy into the fuel. I've got all that being done in the background on a hidden tab in the steam power plant spreadsheet. But you can pull that up and you can take a look at it, and I'll show you how to get in there if you want to. Let's see. So Jimmy Vasquez Madera, what are your thoughts on fusion energy and the news that has been blooming regarding the advancement of the area? Are we truly capable of sustaining a fusion long enough to convert it into a cycle? I sure hope so. If we can get fusion energy to work, all this is going to be, we won't care about it so much anymore. We're still, we're going to have so much energy. I'm sure we're going to get there, but that's definitely more of a theoretical physicist thing. I'm sure some mechanical engineers are working on it, but I think it's more of a physics thing right now. I know that we've gotten the temperature inside the reactors to be really, really, really big, or the fusion chambers. You need a high temperature to, cause the reaction to begin, and we have to sustain it. I have not been following it that closely because it's one of those things that every time I've gotten excited about it, we find out it's 20 more years away. But I really hope we get it in my lifetime because, I mean, right now the reason we have all the steam power plants, internal combustion engines, gas turbines, things like that is because all we know how to do is take chemical energy, nuclear energy, and break it apart, and then that releases heat. But it's also not safe and it's hard to do in your automobile because that car wrecks, you got a nuclear disaster. And we know how to take chemical energy, release it, and then find a way to harness it, right? You can burn a bucket of gasoline all day long in the backyard. It's just gonna have a big explosion. It's not being harnessed. These devices, steam power plants, gas turbines, internal combustion engines, they take that energy release, grab it up, and make it do something, right? In a gasoline engine, you've got a cup reciprocating like a regular four-stroke engine. You've got a cup of gasoline, and air, which is your piston. You've got a lid on it. You explode it. Instead of going everywhere, it can only push the piston up because you've constrained it to go up because of the cylinder walls. You've converted that thermal energy into linear work. That through the crankshaft rotates the crankshaft, spins the wheels through the drivetrain. You get to harness it. Can't harness all of it. It's a lot wasted. Now, if we get fusion, we're just going to be smashing things together, releasing all this energy, and we are going to be golden. We will no longer have to live in we're not living in the Stone Age, but I'm sure at some point we're going to think this was the Stone Age in terms of energy production. It will get there. Hopefully it'll get there in your lifetimes. I'd love it if we got there in my lifetime, but sadly, statistics say I've only got 40 more years to go, so I don't know if that's going to happen. That's assuming I make it to 83. I'm hoping I do. Let's see. So sources of losses, incomplete combustion is the big thing, poor insulation. In this lab, we are assuming 100% combustion efficiency. Usually it's pretty high, 90, 95, 98%, because really you're just got to mix the fuel and air properly. If you can get that mixture going on, you got the chemical reaction. That's probably the least of our concerns nowadays. We've kind of figured out how to do combustion properly. Boiler efficiency. This is how much of the energy supply or released, by the combustion process gets into the water to boil it. So that means we have to route it there. We have to get good heat exchanger, good insulated boiler, etc. So that is the energy supplied to the water in the boiler divided by the heat released by the combustion. So after the combustion's occurred, energy's been released. However, it's in contact with the water, probably with a heat exchanger. We want to get that into the water to boil it. If the boiler is not insulated, we lose some of that to the surroundings, and that's not ideal. Source, boiler to heat. Boiler to heat the water and produce usually superheated steam to drive the turbines. That's the main thing. Because the furnace and the boiler are kind of intertwined. Thermal efficiency. This is a little different than the other ones because you're not looking at a mechanical component. This is the main one you study when you first start studying these types of cycles in thermodynamics. You look at the thermal efficiency of the cycle. Basically, it's what is the net work output? So if you have some work you got to supply into it, okay, that subtracts from the work you're delivering. What is that divided by the amount of energy supplied? Right? How much heat did you have to add to the system? So this is for heat engines, which is what we're talking about right now. I didn't define a heat engine. We're not going to do all that today, but you will in thermodynamics. You can Google it too. It's defined as the work produced over the heat supplied. So how much heat was supplied to the water? That's our medium. And then how much work can we actually deliver? Source, boilers, pumps, turbines, heat loss, and pipes, etc. These all affect that. If the pump's not efficient, you got to put more work in to run the pump. So that's eating away at the power produced by the turbine. Turbine's not efficient, you're losing power, you're getting less power produced. Heat loss in pipes, you've got to supply more heat in the boiler to maintain the same power output. Pressure loss, everything. So a lot of things contribute to that. That's the main one you study in thermodynamics. And that's the one you can compare to Carnot cycle. Carnot cycle tells you the theoretical maximum thermal efficiency you could get. And then you look at the actual cycle and you get the actual amount. Mechanical efficiency. The actual work produced divided by the energy supplied to the turbine. So the steam goes into the turbine. It has a certain amount of energy. how much of that energy from the steam as it expands past the blades actually spins the blades and then rotates the shaft. Let's see. Alejandro Mijon Caballera from Mexicali. Let's see. Do you believe hydrogen could be a better option for energy production? I think hydrogen would be a great option. I think the biggest challenge is storing it. But I mean, you get out basically water, right? When you're done, water vapor. So it is a very clean fuel. I don't know how much, because I know it costs money to produce it, because I think a lot of time we do it through like applying electricity, I think oxygen, I'm not exactly sure, but I know some electricity is involved to produce it at large scales. So if that outweighs the amount of power you're producing in the device, it may not be ideal for cost savings, also with storage and transportation. But if we find a very efficient way to produce it, very cost-effective way, it might be great. But again, it's storage, it's safety. I think that's why we don't do it in automobiles. It's not, people are worried about the safety of trying to store high pressure hydrogen in the car. But again, yeah, I think it would be a great possibility if we just find an efficient way to produce it, so it's not, a waste of money, and that doesn't cost more than it gives. And that's a big thing with a lot of fuels, a lot of cycles, is there's a lot of great ideas out there, but if it costs more than you're actually saving by doing it, I mean, we live in a capitalist society. Even the communism societies and the free love hippie societies, they got to pay the bill somehow, right? And if you're spending all your money or all your bartering stuff on power, but you're not getting it enough to do anything with, well, it's not worth your time and energy. So, we've got to think about that. It's cost analysis. So I recommend doing engineering management for a minor or even grad school when you're a mechanical engineer or any engineer, because you learn a lot about the business side of things, cost benefit analysis, project management, ways to make these things happen efficiently, money-wise. Because engineering, we'd love it if it all just was in a bottle. We had no money to worry about, but it's all about that, because we got to pay to make things happen. So the shaft work produced by the turbine divided by the energy delivered by the steam to the turbine. Steam power plant, or the steam turbine, that's the source, right? We're trying to extract the energy from the steam, and we extract it by way of the turbine blades. If the turbine blades are not efficiently designed, they're not going to rotate properly, and the steam is not going to rotate them as smoothly as we'd like, and we're going to not use as much of the energy in the steam to rotate the shaft. Some of it will be used to overcome the inertia or whatever in the blades to make them spin. So again, we're trying to make things as efficient as possible. You can take whole courses on gas turbine blade design. Let's see, Monica Salinas from Mexico. Let's see. From your point of view, do you think it's good for a country to start a refinery, or is it better to bet on electric energy? Well, electric energy has to come from, I mean, right now, and that's a good question. You're either going to use nuclear power to produce the energy in the electric, in a steam power plant or in a gas turbine, or you're going to have to use, petroleum or other, natural gases, non-renewable resources. We don't have the, I think what would be a better idea if we could figure it out is very, very cost-effective, high-efficiency, low-cost photovoltaic cells, because then it's coming from the sun, or better wind turbines, because it's coming from there. But right now, in the beginning of the slides, you can go back and see that on the Blackboard, the presentations there. Only 7% of our power comes from, 1% comes from solar. Very little comes from, I think almost none of it comes from geothermal. 7% comes from wind. Not a lot's coming from there yet. Now, and most of that's just because the technology is not there yet. So the technology is not there for that. And if you don't have nuclear capabilities to run a power plant, you're still going to be using a refinery. If it's going to be natural gas, natural gas, that just comes right out of the ground. So yeah, it depends. If you're not going to be running the steam power plant on, petroleum, you don't even need a refinery, I guess. But yeah, in the end, most of our stuff, though, our chemical energy comes from the earth for now, and you got to find a way to get it out of there. So hopefully, again, one day we will no longer be there. So I can't really answer what I think would be the best one. I don't think you can do one without the other right now. Let's see. Electrical efficiency. The ratio of electrical power produced to the power supply. That's the generator side right there. If that's not looking good and it's got bad numbers and you're a mechanical engineer, you can put your hands in the air and say, I'm done. Ask the electrical engineer to handle it. You can throw them under the bus because that's their job. Don't throw them under don't make them look bad. But I like to think electrical. I mean, I'm fascinated by electricity. I like learning about electrical stuff, but generators, that's electrical engineers. Let's see. Electrical efficiency is electrical power produced over the shaft work produced by the turbine. And that's the generator, right? I mean, there's moving things in there, stator and rotor and stuff, but the design of it's electrical engineers. Let's see. Overall efficiency. This is just the beginning to the end. So the ratio of electric power produced to the available energy content in the fuel. Like I said, in our lab, it's going to be 0.33% or 0.3%. It's very, very small. And I said the wrong number before. It's like it's 99.7% of it's wasted if it's 0.3% efficient, huh? Wow. But that power plant is not meant to be used for anything other than a demo, but it's great because you can see where all the losses are. You can burn your hand on things and know that should be insulated. That's energy loss. You can see the routing of the pipes. You can get a feel for how you would improve upon it. Electrical power produced over chemical energy in the fuel. Source, everything in the system. All right, that's good. We got an hour right there. Let's talk about the lab activity step. Then we'll go to Blackboard, go through all that. Then we'll I'll do a brief touch on the steam tables. I'm not going to get too far on that because really, if you haven't studied saturation curves and that concept, they're going to look like a wall of numbers. But I will talk a bit about it. And then if we have time, we'll answer questions until we're done. And then if we end early and we have time, I'll go back to the MET thing. But I don't know that I need to because, only if we have extra time and we want to fill it. So your activity. Now, if you're a student and you do this lab, what you do is you go in the lab, or actually I go in there first thing in the morning and I get the boiler turned on. I let that run for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, because I got to come back and forth because the water expands when it boils up. And when it heats up, and then it hits the shutoff valve, and you have to release some water or to make the boiler keep running because the heater will cut off it where it does already hit max operating pressure. So it's a back and forth thing for a while. Doesn't happen quickly because it takes a while to boil things. And then once it's up to temperature or up to pressure, then the class comes in there. We walk through all the valves and gauges and dials and switches and knobs, and I have one student with the procedure, another 3 or 4 students walk around the room and they have to go flip the switches, turn the knobs, get everything running to get the cooling system started and then get the vapor system started, right? You got to get the cooling side going on and then you've got to get the steam running out of the boiler into the turbine and run out. Then that's got to run for a good 20 minutes to get up to speed on everything. You don't want to just open the valves and let it rip because you got water in the system because when you shut a power plant down, you get condensate in there. Condensate's going to lie in the pipes. Got to lie in the bottom of the turbine. Turbines do not work well with multi-phase. They like either gas turbines or vapor turbines, gas turbines, or water turbines like you might have in a hydroelectric dam. If you have water vapor mixture in a turbine, it reduces performance and that reduces your thermal efficiency and mechanical efficiency, everything. So you got to run slow. You got to drain water out of the casing. Most steam power plants don't get shut off that often. We need power running, but in this one, we do that. And then we let it run. Then we go in there to take all the data. We go through there, get all the stuff. Then we get the shutdown process. Then we do calculations based on what you studied in Thermo 1, Thermo 2. This is a lot simpler. You're not going to get to the startup shutdown. You're going to watch a video of me talking about that stuff. Then you're going to record some basic calibration information. So I'm going to go to the spreadsheet in a minute. You're going to download the spreadsheet to record your data. First thing first. I've got these things color-coded because that's the color of the cells in the spreadsheet. We have pre-start for calibration of gauges and thermometers, and then the readings during operation. So if you're in the lab, you would want to record the pressure on all the gauges, the temperature on all the thermometers before you start anything up. If they're calibrated properly, they should read, the pressure gauges should read 0 because that's 0 gauge, and the thermometer should read the room temperature. If they're not reading 0, you got to do a correction. Basically take its reading value, subtracted that from the atmosphere, or subtracted atmospheric value from it. You get your correction, and you correct the results. All that's done in the background too. You're going to record those things, and then the calculation section is going to do the correction for you. So you're going to get the pre-startup. Once you get all that done, then you're going to watch 2 videos going through the actual startup procedure. Then you're going to actually record all of the bits of information. Then you're going to watch a few more videos for recording flow rate of fuel and steam. And then you're going to, well, once you plug it all in the spreadsheet, it actually outputs everything for you. But if you want to, I'll tell you how you can be more involved with it, make it more advanced. Output, what it's going to do. So everything you're recording is gauge pressures on the gauges. A gauge, any kind of pressure gauge, reads the pressure relative to atmosphere. If it reads 0, it doesn't mean you're absolute 0 pressure. It means that you're 0 gauge pressure. You're reading the same as atmosphere. But steam tables that engineers use to determine the energy of the steam and the water at different locations in the cycle, so we can figure out how much energy is being added to the water, that's all tabulated absolute. So we got to convert all the gauge pressure to absolute. And I'm converting them all to SI because it's just nicer. And then calculate data and performance results as well. These are all auto output. But I will show you where you can unhide the tab, and you can do whatever you want to with it. You can always re-download the unedited one if you mess it up. One comment though, I was trying to design the calculation setup. So because there's steam power properties come from experiments. They're not like a simple clean equation for them. It just doesn't work that way. You can do numerical analysis of it with coding and stuff like that as well. But we get the data from steam tables. However, there are some empirical correlations, which basically just means some experimental results mapped, fits the steam tables, and we put some coefficients in there and we try and come up with some equations. I found 2 good papers, or find the results that way. I found 2 good papers. I really never bothered to do that because I wanted to make this more advanced, and for a class I'm working on developing for the fall, I wanted to find that information. I got it fixed today. I finished it today, but 3 of the equations in the first paper I downloaded were just wrong. I don't know what they did. So I found another source. Most of their equations were correct, but 2 of them were wrong. And then I found another source to get those last 2. I don't know if it's typos in the paper or what, because it's big coefficients. There's like 6 coefficients. One small thing is all wrong. But I finally got that to work. So what you could do is enter temperature and pressure, output all the energies, and be done with it. I don't have that in the spreadsheet. I've got the values directly off the steam table. The point of that is if you mistype a temperature or pressure, you're still going to get the correct answer because I just put the values on that back page. I'm still working on cleaning up this other spreadsheet so you can actually have everything calculated. But it's all going to be done automatically. Watch steam plant introduction video, perform the steam power lab activity, and we're going to go there in a minute. The spreadsheet performs all calculations for you. There's nothing to plot or a graph because we're just doing one collection of data. Loaded calculation just means we've loaded up the system. We've got output, power. We're looking at the performance of this thing. Calculations are very complex. That's the thing. If you were, the actual equations are actually very simple, but it's trying to find the energy of the steam in the water. We're actually looking for something called enthalpy. Enthalpy is the sum of internal energy and flow energy, and that's the energy of the moving steam as it goes through the system. It has a pressure and density and has internal energy. All of that is thermodynamics part 1 when you take a thermodynamics course. That's all the background. But if you don't understand that, you don't know what you're doing. And then, well, you won't know what you're doing here. You won't know where the equations came from. And then you got to figure out how to find the enthalpy off the steam table. So that takes a lot of practice as well. So that's why we're not going through all that in this class. That's a full-on thermo course. If you are familiar with them, though, feel free to attempt them on your own by referring to your thermodynamics notes and textbook or an online reference. Again, I show you how to unhide the tab. Let's go to Blackboard. I thought because I was so exhausted today, I was going to not make it through this, but apparently I've gone faster than I normally do. All right, let me stop sharing this. I'm going to go to Blackboard. I'm going to share Firefox. All right, so you should have this up there. Let me get the chat up again. All right, so what we got here? Steam power plant basics. This is just a PDF of that presentation I just gave, so you got everything in there you need. Spreadsheet to record your data. And actually, you know what I'm going to add here real quick while we're sitting here? I'm going to add. I'm going to give you all the lab course pack that I use. You probably don't see this. I'm just going through my my folders here, my computer. I seem to find this. Oh, there we go. Lab documents. I'm going to upload the Steam. So if you wanted to really, if you want to do this like if you, as you would in a class, you do all the calculations. I'm going to show you what I'm uploading right now once I've done this. I've just uploaded, so you can see this again. Go out here to chat again. I've uploaded this Steam Power Plant.pdf. What that is the lab packet the students start with. So it gives you a lot more information. You can use this to do all your calculations. If you're interested and you want to do that, I highly recommend it. But if you haven't done Thermo 1 or looked at the power plant power cycle, this is going to be rather confusing. One thing you're going to notice, though, in this power plant is not a superheater. It's called a Scotch boiler, basically the kind of boiler you would use if you were, heating a building. You're not superheating the water there. So we actually are. So it's a non-superheater. That's why we have something called a calorimeter. We'll get into all that. You'll see all that in the videos. But don't worry about that right now. The point of that is if you're taking Thermo 1 or Thermo 2, where you start reading about that, say, hey, why does this look different? It's because this is not the most efficient power plant. This was designed. We had a bunch of, let's see, it must have been 30, 35 years ago, I think I've been told. An old professor of ours, he's an adjunct now, he's just retired. He's a great professor. He's the one that hired me a long time ago. Someone had donated to him a steam power boiler and a turbine. And so he had some students, Navy nuke students who were in nuclear sub, nuclear ships. And they worked in the power room because nuclear sub, nuclear ships still, it's a steam power plant in there. Nuclear is just a source of energy for it. They put it all together. It's very simple, but they had a Scotch boiler. It's not a superheater. So they had what they had to work with. So it's been working ever since. It's so great. I mean, it's not modern at all, but the purpose of this level of engineering when you're an undergraduate is to, especially engineering technology, is to understand why things do what they do. And you can't do that if everything is clean and hidden behind stainless steel walls and all you see are digital readouts. You got to understand what is leading to the problems. So I got that there. Spreadsheet. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to share this screen so I can open. I think I need to stop sharing that. And now I need to share the spreadsheet. So, all right. So what is this fancy looking spreadsheet I did? I've got some instructions on the top here. Yes, this is from Carme Berenice Rodriguez Martinez from Tepic, Mexico. Yes, these are all on Blackboard. So I'll go back in a minute. I'll go back to Blackboard and I'll show you where the link for that is. That's a good question. Enable editing. Let me do it. There we go. So what I've got here, if you look here on the spreadsheet, you're only going to be entering data in the green cells and the blue cells. The green cells are pre-startup readings. The blue cells are what you record during the activity. All the peach cells are going to output the data you need. What I did to make this as clean as possible is these cells here all are going to read 0 until everything in the green and blue is loaded up. If you don't do that, it would just lead to error messages of that in some of the cells. So they're all going to stay 0, but when you get the very last thing entered here, you're going to get all this is going to pop up, and all down here, calculate data is all going to pop up too. Right now, it's all waiting for data. They're designed to not give you anything until all of these peach things here are non-zero. Okay. So what is this stuff? Pre-startup readings. These are the readings that they should be room temperature and 0 gauge pressure. Most of them are, not all of them are. These blue ones are the actual readings that you're going to do. And then over here is all of the are the corrections and unit conversions. Okay. So where does that come from? If you look down here on the tabs, you only see activity data and results and nothing else. I did that to avoid any kind of, somebody accidentally deleting that tab. But if you right click on that tab, the activity data, this Excel does this, and say unhide calculations, you can see where the magic's made. It's not even that involved actually, because again, all these enthalpies here, these values, this using steam table information down here that I'm highlighting, these values all came, I read them off the steam table. So no matter what temperature and pressure you put in the upstream side, these are going to be correct. It's because it's not an easy equation for it. I finally got my spreadsheet to work to do that, but it's way more complex and it's not cleaned up and ready for prime time yet. This right here was going to be here using equations, see background calculations. Ignore this. I should have deleted that. That's why I hid all this stuff. This is for the corrections. None of this matters. That's why I had it hidden. I mean, it doesn't matter, but that's why I had it hidden. But if you want to, check yourself on the H values, if you use the steam table, this is how you'll do it. I'm going to hide that again. And over here are all the results. They will be there. The calculations, it's all in there. You don't need to worry about it. But if you want to calculate this stuff yourself, the PDF I uploaded to Blackboard just now gives you the equations for how to do that. We just don't have time to explain all that. Let's see. This is from J.U. Leo Chow from Chiayi, Taiwan. What are some ways to learn thermodynamics on my own? Any recommended textbook or course? And what are the prerequisites for mathematical background? So thermodynamics, every university that I know of, whether it's engineering technology or engineering, says Calculus 1 is a prereq. For Thermo 1, though, you don't need Calculus 1. I mean, you can get by without it. There may be a couple of times where you might need to do a brief integration. It's important to understand the concept of calculus for derivatives and integrations to derive some equations, but you're learning more about what energy is and things like that. So not so much. But Thermo 2, if you're engineering, you're going to need some calculus because you start looking at things called Maxwell's relations and some more complex stuff. But for the most part, Calculus 1 is really all you really need, and chemistry and physics. Thermodynamics is a lot of chemistry. And I'll zoom in. I had somebody request to zoom in. That's a good idea. A lot of chemistry and thermodynamics. Not quite like what you saw in chemistry class, but the concepts from there are involved because you're looking at energy of substances. How do you figure what that is? Let's see. So then let's see. To learn on your own. Any thermodynamics textbook is probably the best bet. But if you send me that email, I'll try and send you some links. I don't really have one off the top of my head. You can Google around. Be careful when you Google. Sometimes you're going to get things like I got those papers that were published in some journal 20 years ago and had typos all throughout, so they didn't work. But I would start off by just searching, understanding the first law of thermodynamics and the difference between heat and work and state properties, things like that. So just, if you just say, or Google classical thermodynamics for an undergraduate, because thermodynamics can be studied in classical sense or statistical sense, which is way more accurate, way more complex, looks down to the microscopic level or particles of things bouncing around doing their things. We tend to look at things classically. We look at a room, it's got some average temperature and pressure, that's how it is. Don't worry about that. You don't want to get caught up in all the details of statistical thermodynamics. Look up classical thermodynamics, undergraduate, heat, work, equilibrium. First law of thermodynamics. That's probably the best start right there. But if you send me an email, I will try and see if I can dig up some references for you. Usually this is a sophomore or junior level course in college, most engineering programs. Let's see. So here's just a zoomed in. But again, you're going to have the spreadsheet so you can see it. Do not put anything in the peach cells. These peach cells, I tried to lock them, but you can't. I can't figure out how to lock them by themselves. Either locks the entire spreadsheet or nothing. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I couldn't figure it out, so I didn't. These are where you enter your data. Okay. Down here is what you'd be calculating if you were a student. And again, feel free to use information that I've got uploaded if you want to do more of that. So that's the activity. Or that's the spreadsheet. I'm going to close it out. Go back to stop sharing. Close that out, and we'll go back to Blackboard. Go to my Firefox. So back to this. If you go to the REYES, the homepage of this thing. So this is the homepage. You got the link was sent to you all in the email. It's a very long link, so if I put it up here, you're not going to write it down because it's really hard to write down. But you all got the Blackboard. You all got the email. If you don't have it, send an email through the REYES website, and we'll make sure that you get it again. But in here, you've got the several things. Down here, Python for physics. You've got some Excel videos and readings we've had up there. And you get the 3 engineering-related stuff, fundamentals of engineering. You got fluids lab activities, which static fluids and moving fluids. These were done on last Monday and the Monday before by Dr. Ayala. You've got the materials testing lab, which was done last Friday by Professor Escobales and will be done again, if I'm not mistaken, next Friday by Professor Escobales. And then you got thermodynamic lab activities. You've got an introduction to what MET program is. I'm not going to go through this today because we did it once. I'm just going to spend time answering questions and stuff. And my throat is getting really dry. But that's the PDF talking about the MET program, difference between mechanical and aerospace and MET, and at least in the US perspective. And this here is the conduction heat transfer one from last time. Feel free to go through that if you haven't. These will be available. All this will be available until August 13th. And then this here is the thermal one, part 2. This has got all the documents, the spreadsheet, introduction video, and then the activity. And that's that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor up to questions. But while they're coming, I'm also going to pull up the STEAM tables and talk briefly about those. Let me pull my PDF STEAM tables. But any questions, please talk. I'm open. I could be here all the way till 3 o'clock, which is another 38 minutes if you want me to be. I am not going anywhere. Let me see my pen. I'm going to pull up the SI appendix. Let me share this. Let me share STEAM. There we go. And then pull chat back up again. All right. So let's talk about the STEAM tables for a minute. Those of you that are going to be in mechanical engineers, this will either be your nightmare or they'll be your favorite thing. It's a shame about thermodynamics. So many, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but most engineers that I talk to in industry who graduated tell me they did not like thermodynamics. It was their least favorite subject. And the big part of that is that you don't understand, you don't really, it's all new topics. You don't really have a class in high school where you talk about energy, work, heat, first law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics. What is enthalpy? What is flow energy? What is flow work? How does a steam power plant work? What is the second law of thermodynamics? What's the Clausius inequality? All these things I'm just dropping out there, you learn them all in Thermo 1. So it is a challenging course because you're also relying on math, chemistry, and physics. And a lot of students don't like chemistry. A lot of mechanical engineers, for some reason, say they don't like chemistry. But if you can get past that and learn to love the steam tables, you're going to love thermodynamics, which is, like I said, to me, it's the best thing in the world. Thermodynamics, chemical reactions, combustion, not chemical reactions in chemistry, but the application of it in power cycles, getting the energy out. It's just, there's nothing more fascinating to me than this stuff. So here they are. This is the appendix in the textbook that we use. Every book you use in thermodynamics is going to have an appendix. They're all different, but we're going to look at the steam table. So before we get to, I'm not going to pull it up yet. So the main concept of anything undergoing phase change. You learned this a bit in chemistry. You're going to probably, if you haven't yet, you will when you take chemistry. You learn about property diagrams. It's basically a 3-dimensional space, which is a 3-dimensional grid, X, Y, and Z axes. One of them is temperature, one of them is pressure, and one of them is the specific volume, which is the inverse of the density. So you can just call it the density if you want. Then on that, you've got different spots, right? You've got liquid, solid, vapor phases. Now I'm looking in the mirror. I don't know if I'm putting that in the right positions right there. If I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking in front of me, the vapor is down on by my right knee. The solid is off to my left side, and the liquid's kind of up to the right if I'm looking at the screen. But you can just Google property diagram of a substance. So that basically shows you the temperature, pressure, and density relationship of substances at different phases, whether liquid, gas, or solid. And then there's also some amount of energy required to get between those phases. Now, in thermodynamics, we're mostly concerned about liquid to vapor transition because we're looking at refrigeration cycles, which involves a refrigerant, which is vapor, which is boiling and condensing, and steam power, which involves a liquid. Water is boiling and condensing. You can do solids as well, but it's not so much as something you usually don't look too much of that in the Thermo 1, Thermo 2, just because at this, until we get fusion and we no longer have to worry about power generation, this stuff's important. So they involve things that change phase, liquid to vapor. So that aside, now when we look at this stuff, if you look at one of the diagrams, you're going to see a line that separates liquid and vapor. And it's going to look like you're liquid 1 second, you're vapor the next. That couldn't be farther from the truth. You have to supply a whole lot of energy to get from the liquid to the vapor. Enthalpy of vaporization, we call that. Don't worry about the details on that either. But think about it as you're walking along, you're liquid. You see a mile-high wall you got to climb before you're on top of the mountain and you're vapor. Looking down on it, it looks like you're just looking at a line across them. You're not. You're looking at a big, steep climb you got to get to. And so what we do is we take that line, we put it outside, and we see something called a saturation curve. That saturation curve represents, on the left side of it, the liquid phase, on the right side, the vapor phase, and then there's a dome that goes up. And actually, well, it's not really good picture here. Inside that dome represents liquid and vapor phases mixing together. Think of that as when you get the pot on the stove and you're boiling the water. You got the vapor going into the room, but you still got the water in the pot. Well, if you were to collect that vapor, keep it together, you now have a combination of liquid and vapor water. Certain percentage of liquid, certain percentage of vapor. That chart or that plot lets you figure out the energy and the density and something called entropy and enthalpy of the water, and whether it's a just beginning to boil, we call that a saturated liquid, whether it's during the boiling process, we call that a saturated mixture, or whether it is on the just completed boiling, it's all vapor, saturated vapor. Then you've got superheated region, which is what we call where it's beyond boiling, and you got compressed liquid, which just means it's not about to boil. We don't care about that. Very tippy top is called the critical point, and that's the end of the line on the property diagram. That's all chemistry right there. Now, looking at the energy to get from one to the other, the phase change and all these tables, this is more of a mechanical engineering thing. But understanding the property diagram, what it means, that's a chemistry thing. So we'll take a pause. Jackson Heritage from Virginia. Can a vacuum be used as an insulator? Yes. A vacuum is a great insulator because there's no medium for conduction or convection. Radiation can still get through there, but air is a great insulator as well. That's why double pane windows are great insulators because you just have air inside there, and that's a great insulator. So yeah, vacuums are probably, well, aside from the radiation, they're perfect insulators when it comes to conduction and convection, because there's nothing to carry the energy across if it's perfectly evacuated. But even space isn't perfectly evacuated. But yeah, it could be. That's a good question. So back to this. On a steam power plant, we've got water, right? Entering the boiler, usually it's entering the pump, leaving the condenser, it's completely condensed. It's a liquid. We don't worry too much details about it. It's saturated liquid, compressed liquid. It's a liquid for now. Then you pump it up, still a liquid. Then you route it in, you pump it up to the boiler pressure, and then you heat it. Well, part of that energy, so boilers operate at a constant pressure. That's designed to have a fixed pressure. So you heat it up, it's going to increase its temperature while it gets to the point where it begins to boil. Then it's going to be flat. It's going to be boiling at constant temperature and pressure until it's all boiled, and then you can superheat it more. All that detail you learn in Thermo 1. But what the steam tables give us is the energy, the density, the internal energy, the enthalpy, and the entropy. You learn all that in thermodynamics. It gives you the values of those for the case where the water is just about to begin to boil. From the pressures, from the minimum pressure is its triple point, and the max pressure its critical point. Property diagram, if you recall, critical point is the point at which the substance can exist at all three phases at once: liquid, vapor, solid. For water, it is 0.661 kPa, I think, and 0.01 degrees Celsius. And then the critical pressure is the point above which there's no more. You are just like walking from liquid to vapor. There's no mountain to climb. And that for water, I think it's 373 Celsius. No, yeah, I think 373 Celsius, something like that, and 22,000 kilopascals. It's in the table. We'll get there. The only reason I remember those numbers are close to that is because I've been working on those equations to produce the values by putting inputs in there, and you need to do those to do that. So the steam table basically tabulate the saturated liquid, saturated vapor properties of water. Then you got to, but it sounds simple, right? My students usually get their eyes crossed when they first see this table. I'm just rolling through it, take my time. No need to get, that's one of the tables. So this is for those that were curious about it, saturated water table. This is the temperature. We have two versions of this, a temperature independent variable and pressure independent variable. Let's look at the pressure one first. Both tables are equally the same. Just, are you going to be saying, I know the temperature, I'm going to find values based on that, or you know the pressure, find values based on that. Let's look at the pressure one because we're more familiar with some things like, well, yeah. So the pressure one, we know that at 101.325 kPa, that's atmospheric pressure, water boils at about 100 degrees Celsius. So this is the pressure, and this is the corresponding temperature that the water will boil. It boils at lower pressures, and it will boil at lower temperature. At higher pressures, it boils at a higher temperature, which is why we have high pressure boilers, so we can get it to a higher temperature. Then you have all the properties. You've got the saturated liquid specific volume, which is the inverse of density. Saturated vapor specific volume, internal energy, enthalpy, entropy. You get all this stuff on there. This tabulates what's going on in that curve. The FG value is the difference between the liquid and the vapor. And again, this is a lot of work to teach and understand, a lot of writing I do in class. I'm just giving you an overview of it. So those tables are used for the whether you're a saturated liquid, saturated vapor, or a combination of the two. We won't get into that either, because you can be 20% liquid, 80% vapor, right? And you use these tables. But if you're superheated and you're no longer a mixture, or you're above its, you're above it, your temperature is greater than the boiling temperature at your pressure, you come to the superheat tables and you use these superheat pressure blocks. You usually use this for the turbine exit, but in this one, not so much, because our boiler is not a superheater. I did this for you. All of these are in there because this is not enough time to, and especially because a lot of you are in high school and middle school, from what I understand, and you would not have even started, unless you're really fascinated by something. I hope you are fascinated by it, or maybe if you really got into it out of the nowhere. But if you hadn't, none of your classes are going to talk about the concept of internal energy, entropy, enthalpy, specific volume. Up to thermodynamics, you probably only ever hear about density. Specific volume is just density flipped, but it's an important concept in thermodynamics is something called specific properties, where you take a property such as the volume, which is, we call that an extensive property, right? Because if you have a 1 cubic meter box and you cut it in half, you got 2 half cubic meter boxes. Volume depends upon the extent of the system, its size. Specific volume is the property per unit mass. So think of density. If you got water, its density is 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter. Cut that box in half. Each half still has water, still has the same density, 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter. It's intensive. It's internal to the system. Specific volume is flipped. It's volume divided by mass. We made that extensive property volume intensive specific volume. This whole table has a specific internal energy, specific enthalpy, specific entropy. We do that so we don't have to worry about the quantity of matter. We can just figure out, how much energy per unit mass, and then we deal with that later on. Very important in thermodynamics also, because the state postulate, which is something you learn in thermodynamics 1, that you need 2 independent intensive properties to fix the state, know everything else about it. If it's a simple compressible thermodynamic system, which they all are in thermo 1 and thermo 2. That means that you have to turn volume into intensive, or you can't use a ideal gas equation as a state equation like you do in thermodynamics. All that is just stuff to get you either excited about thermodynamics or terrified of thermodynamics. Hopefully not terrified. It takes a while. All right, let's see. Another question. This is from Ella Brady. Do you think hydrogen fuel could eventually be used as an efficient power source for generating large amounts of electricity? I think it can be, as long as we can find a way to efficiently produce it and not spend a lot of money to produce it. I don't know what the cost is to produce it. I may be wrong, and it may be super cheap to produce, but somehow I remember reading somewhere that it takes a lot of electricity. So first you got to store, compress, so it's unsafe in automobiles. It could be great for power plants, but you got to produce it at that large scale. I don't know if I think that might be a major holdback, is the amount of electricity required to produce it is not really cost effective. Now, if we can find just a source of it, when we start to go to space and we colonize space, and I'm sure there's helium sources out there. I know there is, the stars and stuff. Then we don't have to do that. It'll be there, but we're not there yet. So yeah, I think it'd be a very clean fuel source. It's just a matter of getting the quantity of it produced and not end up costing more than the amount of power that we're producing. Jamie Vasquez Madera, can a John Teller material be a good consideration for a thermodynamic cycle since it acts as insulator and a superconductor? I'm going to have to write that down because I've never heard of the John Taylor material. Now it's just because I don't mess with that stuff. I do more power cycles. I'd be curious. I'll have to look into that. I've got it written down. I'll look into that. And if you want to send me an email about that, I will then reply to you once I get that because I'm curious about that. But yeah, no, I have not looked into that, so I really don't want to just start rambling and then say all kinds of wrong things. And then you all think that this whole day was a waste when hopefully it wasn't. Unless you hate thermodynamics now, you're terrified of it, then I feel bad. But I love thermodynamics. Yeah, so that's the steam tables right there. Again, they're very busy, very complex. My advice when you look at them is focus on the subscript F properties because they're the saturated liquid, and the G properties are the saturated vapors. And then look at the temperature corresponding boiling pressure or the pressure corresponding boiling temperature. As long as you let my throat, I feel like I've been talking crazy, but this is always fun. So I've been talking a lot, but I'm going to leave this up until the next question comes up in case someone has a question about these tables. So Brian, for that one, I do want to do that in the email. This question about the exergy, it's a very good question. Partly of why I also don't want to explain it is that as an engineering technology person, we just don't use it. It's a theory type thing for the most part. We don't use it that much. So I'm not as brushed up on it as I should be. And I don't want to say that. I mean, I understand the concept of it, as exergy is produced. And exergy basically is related to the potential for doing work. It's related to entropy. As exergy is produced, you have less available work you can produce. It's a way of quantifying, losses in a system. But I need to go back and brush up on it because again, as an applied engineering, we did that in grad school, and it's also in thermo book. But MET, we skipped that chapter entirely. It's really not important at all for applying engineering. It's important when you're, doing theory side type stuff. I mean, I don't say it's not important at all, but it's not used in any of the power plant discussion, theory, gas turbines, energy system books, anything taking that up. It's just not. Now, if you're getting into Maxwell's relations and much more complex stuff, it comes into there. That's more mechanical engineering. But yes, if you send me an email on that, I will look up on it and I will try and find a good way to explain it to you. It's just, I'm not as up to speed on it as I am on all this other stuff. And I'm bound to say something wrong. But I'm sure I'll look into it if you send me that email. And I owe you some other stuff too. I've got some books, Brian. I've got a few books to send you. Requests you had. I just haven't done that yet. Haven't made it to my office, so I don't have the current, ISBNs. But I've been writing out what the book names are called. But send me an email, and I'll do both at the same time. I don't think of anything else to talk about here for thermodynamics. I feel like I've gone through a lot. I'm going to close this out here. Back to the blackboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer here for 5 minutes. So because it's a 35-second delay, that gives you guys plenty of time to think of questions if you have them. I don't want to cut anybody off, but also, and then I'm going to keep on going. Whenever the last question comes, I'm setting my timer for 5 minutes. So I'm going to keep on resetting it every time a question comes, so we don't miss any questions of what people are thinking. We also don't, sit on dead air for 20 minutes if there are no questions coming. Oh, that'll sit there for 5 hours. We'd be here all day long, wouldn't we? We'll change that. And then I actually saw a question just now. Andy, watch. All right, question from Angel. Do you think one day we would obtain all the energy from thunderbolts, and how good would it be for us? I think we better. I mean, there's so much of it out there. I think it's, I don't know how, because I'm not an engineer in terms of, well, yeah, I'm not focused on that type of engineering. I think it's a very electrical engineering right there. You have to collect it. It's such a sudden, instantaneous burst of energy. The problem is trying to collect it. Benjamin Franklin, they prove that it is energy, it is electricity. This is what they say, with the key and the kite, but I'm sure people in the country did the exact same thing. He's not the only one that did it. And probably wasn't the first one, but it's what they tell us Americans. However, to harness it, I mean, I hope we do one day. There's so much electricity in the clouds from all, that produces lightning. Just a matter of harnessing it properly. I'm sure we will. We might do that before fusion. I don't know. But if we get fusion to work, then we probably won't even worry about that, though, because fusion will be our eternal supply of energy. Oh, good question. What is your email? That's right, because the last time I had that presentation up. So let me go to, if you go to the MET PD PowerPoint, I'm not going to open up, I have to change the sharing. It's in the very second slide there. So under the thermodynamic lab activities, the day one, just right there, not even day one, it's just right there. Mechanical engineering technology at Old Dominion University. This MET info, either first, second, or third slide has my info. It's got my email in there. Brian Go, is the Carnot cycle process only an isothermal adiabatic? It's only an isothermal, adiabatic, or available to another reversible cycles if isobaric? Well, the definition of the Carnot cycle is the isothermal heat addition and heat rejection. So the source of energy is at the same temperature as the fluid that you're giving the energy to. Not possible to do that because heat transfer will stop occurring. But if you theoretically think about that, that's the heat supply side of a Carnot cycle. So it's defined as a isothermal heat addition. You have isentropic expansion. What isentropic is insulated, adiabatic, no heat transfer, and fully reversible, which is a entropy concept. We're not going to get into it today, but it's the perfect expansion. No energy losses at all. No energy it needed to be done to overcome anything. It's just beautiful, right? It's perfect. That's the isentropic expansion. Then you have isothermal heat rejection. So if the fluid is water that you're adding energy to and rushing through a turbine, whatever, that water is at the same temperature now as the sink or whatever's being used to cool it and pull energy out. You have to have some energy out according to the Kelvin-Planck statement, second law of thermodynamics, part 2, the statements of it. Then you have the isentropic compression back to the initial max temperature in the cycle. That's the definition of a Carnot cycle. That is also fully reversible. There are other reversible cycles out there, but the Carnot cycle is the most common, the most popular, the most famous, and it's the one we use to benchmark other cycles' behavior. When you look at something called the second law efficiency of a cycle, you're taking the thermal efficiency of that, say, steam power plant and dividing it by the equivalent Carnot thermal efficiency, which is only a function of the furnace temperature and the cooling water temperature. That's the maximum theoretical performance you could possibly get. And that's usually covered near the end of the first semester of thermodynamics in most thermodynamic textbooks at the undergraduate level. So again, I'm covering a lot of stuff there. But yeah, so Carnot cycle is defined by isothermal heat addition and rejection, isentropic expansion and compression, all done reversibly. But it's not the only reversible cycle. But if it is those 4 cycles, that's what we call a Carnot cycle. I say Carnot. I don't know. I could Google it and look at the spelling. I always tell my students to Google the density of water if they don't know. And I should be Googling right now how to pronounce, but I just got used to calling it Carnot. And then probably the next minute later, I'll call it Carnot. So I've been doing this long. I don't want to change that right now. And what you'll learn in thermodynamics is we have names for all kinds of cycles. Usually they're the ideal model of what's happening to the working fluid, which is like water or air, whatever you're compressing, expanding, doing things to add energy to. And that ideal cycle is the name usually named after the person who developed it or first understood what was really happening to something that someone banged together in the garage. So the steam power plant, the ideal cycle, which is very simple, but the basic concept of the boiler, the turbine, the condenser, and the pump, is called the Rankine cycle, R-A-N-K-I-N-E. The gas turbine is called the Brayton, B-R-A-Y-T-O-N. The four-stroke gasoline engine is called the Otto, O-T-T-O. The diesel is just called the diesel, named after Rudolf Diesel. Otto is Nicholas Otto. The Stirling is the Stirling, that's named after the Stirling cycle. Ericsson is named after Ericsson. Ericsson is similar to an Ericsson cycle is very hard to do in real life. We don't really have them producing any power. They're very expensive to make happen, but they're very similar to a gas turbine cycle, approaching isothermal, approaching isentropic expansion and compression. Still not really there, or isothermal heat addition, heat rejection. Again, you look at it briefly in thermodynamics, but usually not very much, because not really a practical cycle yet. Atkinson cycle is a modified four-stroke gasoline engine, having to do with it's called an overexpanded cycle, where the expansion and the compression strokes are different lengths. Miller cycle is basically a supercharged Atkinson cycle. Atkinson engine cycles are, I don't know if Prius still have, when Prius first came out, the gasoline part of their engine was an Atkinson cycle. But again, these are all because we don't know how to get energy. We don't have any better way to get energy out of the chemicals. We're trying to find a way to get it out of the chemical, the gasoline or whatever fuel we're using, and get as much as possible to do something useful, produce power. That's why we have so many different types of cycles. We just, if we had fusion energy and the best batteries in the world, everything would be electric. We'd charge the batteries, we plug them into everything, and we wouldn't have to worry about anything else. And again, that's just based on what we know now. I mean, in 200, 300, 400 years, maybe we're like, oh, there's so many other ideas out there that we can't even comprehend other sources of energy or anything beyond fusion. And it's just because technology, I mean, Neanderthals, even us 70,000 years ago, when we first started figuring out how to communicate with each other and not be Neanderthals anymore, this stuff was all foreign. No one ever thought about this stuff. So you never know what's going to happen in hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years. But right now, it's what we got. We got to figure it out. We got to work with it. So our goals, for the most part, usually as engineers these days, is improving the systems as they are. So many incremental improvements. I mean, gasoline, four-stroke engines, turn of the century were very simple, not very robust because they probably broke a lot, but they were very simple. Now there's so much going on. It's not simple at all because every bit of complexity you throw in there has the sole purpose of improving performance, whether it's producing more power or improving the efficiency. So Jackson Herman, that's a good question. How does and this is from Virginia, how does an air conditioner work? So an air conditioner operates on something we call the vapor compression cycle. So the vapor compression cycle, so the second law of thermodynamics, the Clausius statement, says that you cannot take, so for example, if you're sitting in a house and it's 90 degrees outside, I'm going to use Fahrenheit now because we talk in English in the US in terms of English units, 90 degrees outside Fahrenheit, and right now it's 70 degrees in the house. Over time, because the wall's not perfectly insulated, Clausius statement says it's going to warm up in the house. There's no way my house is going to get any cooler on its own. So the air conditioning cycle is how we do that. And it's actually the vapor compression cycle, which what it does is it attempts to move energy from a low temperature to a high temperature, which violates the Clausius statement of the second law. So we do that. We can't do that naturally. We have to do that by applying work to the system. So they're actually work requiring devices. So what happens is, if, for example, let's look at a freezer space, because the same cycle. If you got your freezer and you want to keep that freezer space at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and the kitchen's at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not going to stay there over time. It's not perfectly insulated. You're going to have it freeze up over time. So what we got to do, we got to pull energy out of that freezer space to keep it at 28 degrees Fahrenheit and kick that into the hotter kitchen so that it doesn't go back in there. I mean, that's why you want very, very well insulated refrigerators, so you don't have to keep pulling as much out, but we got to pull it out because it's not perfectly insulated. So how do we do that? We take a substance that can boil at temperatures below that of the freezer space. We call that refrigerant. Most common refrigerant in residential applications is R134A. Refrigerants can be very chemically toxic. You can use water, you can use anything, so many things you can use for refrigerant. It all depends on what temperature you're trying to maintain a space at. So in this application, refrigerant, for example, at whatever evaporator pressure you have, maybe the refrigerant's going to boil at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that means that if you supply the refrigerant in a heat exchanger, in the evaporator heat exchanger. It comes in as a liquid vapor mixture or liquid. It's liquid vapor mixture based on the cycle, but it's, it still has room to boil. So if it's at constant pressure, things boil at the same uniform constant temperature if the pressure is maintained constant. So is it 20 degrees Fahrenheit where it boils at this pressure? It's going to stay 20 degrees Fahrenheit until it's done boiling. So you pass that by this freezer space, which is at 28. Heat transfer is going to naturally occur from the warmer space, which is warmer than the refrigerant, into the refrigerant. It's going to boil the refrigerant. Now I could just dump that out into the air, but you'd probably get, OSHA would be on you. Environmental would not like it. And then you got to pay for more refrigerant. So what we do is we do a cycle. We don't dump it out in the atmosphere. It could be a bad idea. We now say, okay, how do I get that refrigerant that's now a vapor back to a liquid? I can't just condense it because now I need, that's defeating the purpose. I'm going right back into the, I need to somehow get that energy out of the freezer space and kick it to the room. So what I do is I now take this freshly boiled refrigerant and I compress it in a compressor by applying work to it. What that does is it increases pressure to the condenser pressure and gets it to a temperature above that of the room temperature. So say your room is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and for example, it compresses it to a high pressure and it might compress it to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the back of the refrigerator, if you go back to your refrigerator and touch the back of it, it feels a bit warm because it is at a temperature higher than the outside. It's a huge heat exchanger, might have fans there or something. And now that heat or the energy naturally wants to kick out into the room because it's hotter refrigerant vapor than room. Now you condense it to a liquid. Now the problem is you're still at a very, very high pressure and you're a higher temperature than the evaporator inlet. So what you do is you expand it through a thermal expansion valve, which is basically it's an orifice. You can think of it as a pipe with a disc in there, a little hole. It goes there, it sprays, and it suddenly drops its pressure. And the Thomas Joule effect, if you Google that, tells you that when you drop the pressure drastically, you also drop the temperature. So we get it back from the 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or it's probably not quite that hot now because it's not, but it's, whatever temperature it is, down to the 20 degrees Fahrenheit again, and it continues the cycle. So what we do is we're now pulling energy out of the cool space and kicking it to the outside. Now, an air conditioning unit, the cool space is your house, and where you're kicking the energy is the outside. So the condenser unit, all that's outside. If you have a refrigerator, it's the refrigerator space and the freezer space. Basically the same concept. Now, a heat pump is the same concept as well, but different desired output. A refrigerator and air conditioner, the desired output is the heat removed from the space, the energy removed. So either your house or the refrigerator. Kick it, if it's a refrigerator, you're kicking that heat into the house. If it's air conditioner, you're kicking the heat to the outside. But in the cold winter, there's a ton of energy outside. Think of the outside in the winter as your freezer space. Take your refrigerator. Your refrigerator's not designed to run this way, so it's probably not going to do much at all. But you put your refrigerator front door wide open, put it out, out your front door, seal it up, and have the outdoor be the freezer space. The pump and compressor are not sized for that, but that's technically what's happening. Now it's pulling energy from the outside. The freezer space is causing the refrigerant to boil. It goes compressed to the compressor, goes to the condenser, and kicks that heat into the house, which is what you want now because you want to heat the house up in the winter. So in that case, that is the desired output. But the problem with that is if it's too cold outside and you can't get the evaporator down low enough for the refrigerant to boil, then you're not going to use a heat pump. So you don't see heat pumps in really cold climates because refrigerant is a substance. It has its own property diagrams. You can't just violate laws of physics and chemistry and say, no, you're going to boil at this temperature because I told you to. It doesn't work that way. But that's a very quick and dirty rundown of that. You still use steam tables, but we use refrigerant steam tables. We don't call them steam tables, we call them refrigerant tables. You can use CO2, ammonia, R134A, R122, R12. These are all just refrigerants. Refrigerant is anything that will boil at a temperature below that of the space you're trying to keep cool. So even water can be a refrigerant if you're trying to keep your space at a very hot temperature. So we got it's 2:55. I'm going to stay on right until the end now. No reason to set my alarm anymore because we either get more questions or we won't. I hope you all enjoyed that. The two that I did, that's the end of what I'm doing for this event. I like this one way better than the conduction one. I like power cycles. The conduction experiment gave you guys a chance to do calculations and stuff, and it was very simple for that. But I love thermodynamics, applying it to power cycles and energy production and things like that. And using, it's just fun. Yeah, this is good. If you get into mechanical engineering, you're going to learn about this stuff. If you get into civil, you'll probably do semester 1 of thermodynamics, electrical semester 1, because you do care about the heat transfer part if you're civil and electrical, in chemical as well. Petroleum engineers too. But the mechanical, you really get into the cycles. Let's see. This is from Louisa Engel. Do you think generating plasma with extremely high temperatures could generate more energy? What could be the risk of it? Thank you for answering all my questions. You're welcome for me answering all your questions, but I can't answer that one because I really don't know. I know plasma is like the fourth state of matter, but I don't ever mess with it, so I really don't want to give you any wrong answer on that one. I think the trick would be trying to harness that energy, because I think there's ionization going on inside there. I just don't ever work with it. Plasma is something that you work with if you work with probably really, really hypersonic flow, and you have plasma, on the wingtips because the high temperature of the, due to the friction, you might deal with that type of stuff. I think the last time I even talked about plasma was when I was taking a course on hypersonic flow. When I take my PhD courses, let's see if I'm in 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. We talked about there because of high temperature, high speed. But I haven't looked at it since. It's not something that applies to what I do and what I teach. So unfortunately, I really don't have an opinion on that. Space travel, you're going to deal with that when you re-entry and stuff. Satellite stuff. So I bet if you do aerospace engineering, you'll study that. And aerospace engineering really is just a subset of mechanical engineering. If you think about for airplanes and stuff, mechanical engineering is going to focus more on the mechanics of it, how the engine works, that stuff. Aerospace will worry more about the drag, the lift, the shocks, surface heating, all that kind of stuff, friction. And one thing, when you become a mechanical engineer, student, if you're not yet, and you do plan to do that, probably the biggest thing that just occurred to me is I have a lot of students who try to take a shortcut and not use the steam tables, and they go online and Google enthalpy calculators. Those things work. They're basically just pulling from a database and interpolating behind the scenes. But if you do that, you really don't get a good feeling and understanding of what's happening as you undergo changes in phase and locations in the system. Put the energy into learning how to use the steam tables, no matter what. They're not that hard once you spend some time at them. Taking a shortcut on them is going to shortchange you big time in your career, just because you're not going to know how to do it. I mean, online calculators, they're great if they work. That PDF I downloaded is supposed to be a very, paper from a renowned journal. They were wrong. They did not work. They left out something that was important to tell the reader what they need to do in terms of a unit on something, but they told me everything I thought they told me. So you gotta understand the stuff before you believe the stuff. Oh, another question. Let's see. Was there another question? I think I got all the questions, but yeah, the last few videos, everyone just said thank you. You're very welcome. I'm glad that you all enjoyed it. Galia from Glasgow, Scotland. I'm glad you enjoyed it. This was fun to do. This was I slept like an hour last night. I just could not sleep. So I came into this thinking I was going to be. I think when I get tired, I get faster. So I apologize to the one person earlier who said slow down. It's easier for me to slow down when I'm in front of a classroom of students and I'm writing. But when I'm just talking, I just go. All right. That's all I got, everybody. If you got anything from this, hopefully you got either a love of, or a more interested, more understanding of the applications of thermodynamics and the chemistry stuff that you're taking first few semesters of college and through sophomore, junior year, or if you're in high school and not sure what you do as a mechanical engineering. These are some things you may never have thought about, because a lot of people think of mechanical engineering as mechanics and gears, but it's a lot more. It's energy and everything else. And that's it. So I will see you all later.